Hello, everybody, and welcome to Resolve to Live Forward, the podcast. I'm John Morrow. It's Friday, the day before the 250th birthday of the signing, or at least the release, the publication, the uh, beginnings of the American nationality that is the Declaration of Independence. July the 4th is our national holiday. We celebrate basically the birth of a great nation. And I'm honored to live in the United States of America and very thankful. I've been especially enjoying a lot of the events that have been taking place in our country. It's interesting that we are a nation here in 2026 hosting one of the greatest sports events that you could have in the world. I would say this sports event, in many, many ways, might be even bigger and probably is bigger in terms of its popularity than the Olympics, particularly the Summer Games. And that, of course, I'm talking about the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup. I, in my later years of life, have become a fan of what is called around the world football, literally the emphasis upon FOOT, foot. But at the same time, that football, as they call it, the beautiful game, is fascinating to watch. And the more I watch it, the more I begin to understand the whole mechanism of how it works. And you can clearly see the incredible giftedness of the athletes who make up these international teams that came to North America. Most of the stadiums, principally in the United States of America, but also stadiums in Canada as well as in Mexico. So, all three of these great North American nations, Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico, have been hosting these games. And it's incredible the numbers of hundreds of even millions of people who have come to this country from around the world to experience the World Cup, but while they're here, experiencing our country. And I've enjoyed watching that. It is the 4th of July weekend. It's Friday, July the 3rd. This is episode number 14 in my series. And in this series, I talk about the journey of grief, but I also talk about things that we do and say and think that become a part of the framework of our life. And it has a profound effect upon how we move forward or don't move forward, how we can take two steps forward, three steps back in many, many cases, or we can completely and totally come to a crashing halt and stop and not move at all, or even begin to fall back into something that is far worse than what we think we're going through in the immediate. So, the title of today's episode, and I do have my notes here with me, so I'll refer to them from time to time because I'm putting it together. I wanted to be sure that you understood the direction we're going. This is episode 14. We started this back in April. And in starting it in April, every week, every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time, my podcast comes out. And it's, of course, put out through a podcast hosting site called Buzzsprout, but it's on multiple platforms. And those platforms include, but are not exclusively including Spotify and the Apple Store. There are other podcast platforms as well. I also have a YouTube channel. I hope you'll watch it, like it, and subscribe to it because on the YouTube channel, I'm actually, while audio recording this for podcasting purposes, I'm also doing a video version of it. And this video version is what some of you are watching. The episode today, or the working title of it, is The Story You Keep Telling Yourself. The Story You Keep Telling Yourself. Now, John, you're going to ask John the question. I'm John. John, what do you mean the story you keep telling yourself? What does that have to do with living forward? Well, duh, think about it for a second. Are you living forward with a positive mindset? Get busy living. Or are you living forward with a negative mindset? Get busy dying. And trust me, as I've said before, it seems like an oversimplification, but it really comes down to two things. Those two things. I'll talk about the Shawshank Redemption till I'm blue in the face. I'll probably pull up a chair there in the living room and pull up the movie and watch it again and marvel at the fact that no matter how many times I've watched it, I still keep learning more about the process of living, but most importantly of all, the process of hope and the redemptive power that hope brings into our lives. We are people that, well, we really are the product of how we think, what we do, what we say, what we watch, what we read, the people we keep company with, the things that we do, the values that we project, the things that we grow from. Are you living from truth or from a story that you've repeated so often that you've accepted that story as fact? I'm going to read that again. Are you living from the truth or from a story that you have repeated so often you have come to accept it as a fact? Lies can be believed, and if believed long enough, lies become the truth for the people that have embraced them. Every person carries an internal narrative. I carry one. There are stories that empower us, and then there are quiet stories, or maybe they're loud, painful, agonizing stories like grief that imprison us. But the quality of our future will depend largely upon the stories that we choose to believe and the ones that we choose to rewrite so they fit the narrative that we want to have. Every life has a narrative. Hmm. Wow. Think about it for just a second. Your life has a narrative. Our stories of life and the narrative that is our life is tied in a great sense to what happened to us during the course of our lives, starting with childhood. I have many, many memories of childhood, wonderful, wonderful memories of childhood, but I also have painful memories of childhood. And that pain crosses a myriad of areas. But to simplify, I have experienced emotional pain, I have experienced physical pain, and I have experienced social pain, relational pain. I've experienced failures, but I've also had numerous successes. But sometimes we spend a lot of dwelling on the negative. What about relationships? What about broken relationships? Can you look back at something and say to yourself, the relationship is broken, but was the relationship really all that valuable? Sometimes it takes the experience as you live forward, and that's really what this is all about, to be able to look back at that broken relationship and realize that it really was not contributing to a forward living mindset. So losses can be good as well as bad. Disappointments can be good, although disappointments in most cases are bad, particularly if you tried to do something and you didn't succeed at doing it, and you're disappointed in yourself, or you let yourself down, or you let somebody else down. But there are also victories. And do we really take the time to chronicle, not for an ego trip, but chronicle for a personal look at ourselves internally, at the victories that we've experienced? And I'm beginning to realize that there's memories in my household, on my walls, in my files, the books in the cabinets, and many, many other things that clearly tell me. And then there are relationships that I have in this life among people, friends, family, Toastmasters, that tell me that I've had a lot of great victories and a lot of great successes. Here's what I think we all need to work on. And if you're around somebody who is this way, or you yourself are afflicted with this problem, think for just a second. Limiting beliefs. Somebody says, I'm just not that smart. I am who I am, and I know my limitations. And they want us to accept them as they are. But here's the problem. They want us to accept them with their limitations, and that's okay because that's compassion and kindness. But Aren't they punishing themselves by thinking they can't be any better than they are? They're stuck in the spot that they are. Think about it in the grief sense, because I'm a grief person. I talk about grief. I counsel about grief. I share stories about grief. Grief can be a limiting thing. It can really affect us as far as our thought process. But if we dwell upon the grief, what we do is we lose sight of the fact the grieving is a result of doing something wonderful, of being a part of something wonderful, of having someone wonderful in our life or something wonderful happen to us in our life. And we grieve because we've lost it tragically. Now imagine if you lost it because you just didn't care for it the way you should. That's possibly, for example, in a relationship, divorce. What if you lose a business because you didn't manage it properly? That is heartbreakingly grief. But other limiting stories include, like, for example, hey, you're just too old. And sometimes I get stuck in the old thing because I'm 76 years of age as of this date. I think, okay, you are past your prime. Just pull yourself, set off the side, pull up a couch, and wait to die. Your usefulness is gone. That's BS. What about this one? I've already missed my chance. There will not be another. Is that really, really true? How about this one? Nobody listens to me. And there are some people that don't. There are some people that for my entire life have marginalized me to the point where, as I'm talking about something that I very strongly understand and know, all of a sudden they'll just shift into another gear and go off talking about something. I'd like to be able to say to them, how would you feel if that was being done to you? You had something worth saying and that was worth being heard, but nobody bothered to listen to it, and they just went off and had their own conversation or changed the subject or took their focus off of you and focused on other people. Who are the people out there in your life, for example, that say I'm just average? Are you really just average? Oh, here's one that just aggravates the daylights out of me. I'm the quote is, I'm simply just who I am. I can't help myself. I can't help myself. You are so negative in your mindset. That is a limiting belief. And if and of course the big one is it's just too late. I don't have time anymore. The time has since passed. But are these facts? Are these really conclusions? Are these conclusions really in place and you can't do a thing about them? I suggest that you can, and I believe that if you really want to live a life that is full, that is rich, that is moving forward, and when setbacks come, they cause a brief bump, but they don't take you off your game. They may slow you down. They may even knock you off the road and into a ditch, but you know how to get out of that ditch because you've got the equipment to do it. Are you really stuck? You don't have to be. You can change your story. And that's segment number 3 of this conversation. Let me tell you about my journey. My journey is important because it's what gives me the passion and the drive to do this podcast. And you may think this podcast is crude, but I don't think it's crude because at the end of the day, yes, I think technology is valuable, and I think the better the tools, the better the graphics, the better the mechanics, the more attractive and appealing it is. But the substance of a podcast is communication. And communication is the story that you're sharing with people out there who actually need to hear that story, want to hear that story, and want to align themselves with others who feel the same way. It becomes its own, as my good friend Mark Guy says, your tribe. And so, for those of you that do seek to listen to me, you're part of the tribe, but it's not my tribe, it's our tribe, the tribe of those who have been broken, but are finding a way to resolve to live forward. My story is deeply, deeply steeped, particularly in the last 7 years, in the grief journey and the loss of my wife, Donna. Because at that particular time in my life, and continuing through to today, even though I am emerging and getting better and growing and living meaningfully and experiencing life, I still have dark, dark days. And the lessons that I have learned since the loss of my wife have helped me, but they have not perfected me. And imperfection is fine because as created beings, we are designed for imperfection. We live in a world where the uniqueness of it is the fact that there are differences which will both bring us together, but also will put us at odds with each other. And emotional darkness comes into play in situations like that. But in my life, after the loss of my wife, it's when I rediscovered the power of the word resolve, as my wife and I had first discovered it in late 2017. But the bigger and most important choice in my life was the choice to live forward. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Living forward, my friends, is a choice. Your circumstances may become a part of your story, but they are never going to be the end of your story. The end of your story? Your story's still being written. But if you're going to rewrite your story, let me tell you very quickly, it's not about writing the next paragraph. I've heard that phrase said before. It's time to write the next paragraph of your life. No, it's not a paragraph. A paragraph has to start first with a sentence, one sentence. So here's the question that I want to ask you. Why don't you identify one limiting belief? Listen carefully. Let's rewrite one sentence at a time, and let's start with just one limiting belief. Example. Instead of I always fail, start the sentence by saying I'm learning what success requires. Good idea. How about this one? Instead of saying I'm just simply too old to do something like that, try saying my experience gives me an advantage. Instead of saying I have lost everything that matters in my life, try saying I'm building what's going to come next. Do you see how that looks? That's flipping the script on the limiting belief. If you're still here, you're here for a reason. And I don't think the reason that we're still here has anything to do with a miserable existence. I know that it's very, very easy to get caught up in feeling sorry for ourselves. And feeling sorry for ourselves in the world of grief is not just the grieving process as it relates to the death of someone we loved desperately. Um, there are people that live in grief because their job is a struggle. They need the job. They go to the job. They go to the job because there are people depending upon them to do the job. And I'm not talking about the employer. I'm talking about the people that they care for. So that's going to be a family. That's going to be like, for example, a husband or a wife who are working to take care of the kids, or a single mom working to put food in the mouths of the babies that she has to care for because their lives literally depend upon her. I'm talking about people out there who are caring for a loved one who has a terminal illness, and they are struggling to deal not just with the caregiving process, particularly if that loved one has a cognitive brain disease like Alzheimer's, where their personality is unpredictable. And you think to yourself, why are they being so hateful to me when they have one of those manic behavioral attacks that fall under the category of dementia? And dementia can really swing to the left and to the right like crazy. It's like swerving around a crazy curve or on a mountain road. But the truth of the matter is, the only person who can do anything about that, as far as the mindset, is the individual who's providing the caregiving. But do you think they're having fun? No, they're not. It is an awesome, titanic struggle. Great pain and sorrows associated with that. But what about the individual who has an affliction? They're functionally able, but they're not able to do what they used to do because of the limitations of a debilitating disease. The disease apparently is not life-threatening, but it certainly messes life up. And if we spend too much thinking about, woe is me, why do I have to go through this? I can't handle this. And everything becomes a case of manic depression. I just can't do it. Well, you sometimes have to stop and just simply ask the question, how can I rephrase this story? And it's interesting that if you rephrase the story and you change your mindset and you move away from a limiting belief and start saying positive beliefs, the power of the mind is amazing. Now, it's not going to heal the disease. It's not going to heal the relationship necessarily. It's not going to bring back the loved one that you've lost. But it is going to give you the ability to see a silver lining. And isn't that really what it's all about? Seeing that you're still here, and therefore, if you're still here, you have something worth doing, worth saying, worth believing, worth praying for, worth hoping for. Let's go back to Shawshank Redemption for just a second. One of the greatest surprises in the motion picture for those who have watched it, and by the way, spoiler alert for those of you that I don't know how in the world it is that you missed the opportunity to watch this movie. When you get down to the end, all this time you're thinking, poor Andy Dufresne. Convicted of a murder that he did not commit, murders he did not commit. Sentenced to life without the hope of parole. And in a place that is true imprisonment of the heart, mind, soul, and body. And you discover that the redemptive process has nothing to do with Andy. It has to do with planting the seed of hope into the life of one of the protagonists in the movie, the character played by Morgan Freeman, our good friend Red. Because Andy never stopped hoping, even when all hope seemed to be gone based upon the story. And then at the end, suddenly you realized, Andy was writing that story every single day, little by little, and for over 20 years, only Andy knew. But that's because Andy never gave up. Andy never quit. Andy never stopped. Andy never quit hoping. And because of that hope, he planted that seed in the lives of other people, but in particular to the life of a friend of his that became as close a friend as anybody could ever have in their life. And that, of course, being the character and fellow protagonist, Red. But think about it. Weren't you surprised, those of you that have watched the movie? Did that not just come out of the blue, out of left field? What an amazing story. We didn't know what the chapters were that he was writing. We thought he was just surviving. What story will you stop telling yourself today that limits your capacity to be the best version of yourself? And instead, what story should you be writing? Because you see, the story you repeat becomes the life you expect. Hear me again. The story you keep repeating to yourself becomes the very life that you expect. What is a past chapter that is not the title of your speech? Because you see, here's the thing. The past is a chapter and just a chapter. And there are good chapters, yeah, so chapters. And then there are just frankly very dark chapters. But that's not the title of your life. Changing your life begins with your mind. Change begins the moment that the inner conversation, the one going on in your head changes. The self-talk changes. You stop saying negative stuff. That's a disservice to you. And frankly, that's a disservice to, in my particular case, the one who created me. You cannot live forward while rehearsing yesterday. You cannot. I repeat, you cannot live forward if you keep rehearsing what happened yesterday. Get the thought. I had a friend who told me the other day, you need to stop letting those thoughts have free rent inside your head. I've said it before. It's true. You give it space, you're the one allowing it to occupy a room or maybe the living room. It's in the way, it's in your face, it's messing with your mind, and it's not working to your advantage. Your future is begging you for a better story. And the only person who can write that better story is you. You, you rewrite your story, but you start with one sentence. Take one limiting belief, one negative mindset, that one sentence, and rewrite it into a positive sentence. And do that moment by moment, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, for as long as you can draw breath. And that consistent, positive, living forward mindset and attitude won't just begin to change you, it will overtake you and transform you. That's my story. That's the story that I have to work on every single day. So therefore, this process is something that I'm still working on. And I'm getting better, but I have so much more work to do. Won't you join me in the process as well? Isn't it about time that you gave yourself a hug and embraced the fact that if you were loved, you should love yourself as much as that one loved you? I'm John Morrow. You've been listening to Resolve to Live Forward. And remember, you don't have to erase your past, but you do get to decide what comes next. So until next time, I just ask you, please live intentionally, live courageously, and most importantly of all, always, always live forward.